Right. Good positive start to begin with. Let me go across to Harsh Pant. Harsh, thank you very much for joining us. President Trump saying, I'll always be friends with Narendra Modi. He's a great prime minister. He's great. I just don't like what he's doing at present. But India and the US have a special relationship. There's nothing to worry about. We will always have moments on occasion. I think it would be premature to call it a victory or a truce just as yet. But does this now indicate that both sides don't want the relationship to deteriorate any further and restore some balance in it?
I do think that that's a fair assessment, Parikshit. I think India, if we carefully look at Indian statements over the last few months, in fact, India had been very, very cautious. Indian leaders have been very measured in their tone and in what they've been saying. So from India's side, it was a question of certainly not wanting this relationship to deteriorate to an extent that it has. And I think in some ways this is the turn that this relationship has taken is also a testament to the fact that that Indian democracy will also respond to what Mr. Trump and his advisors repeatedly will say. And what they have been saying have been some things which I think have been unpalatable to a large part of the Indian populace. And so that had meant a certain hardening of public mood against the US. So while the government in Indian government has been very measured in its response, we have seen how Mr. Trump is viewed as part of the problem. His statements, his advisors' statements, repeatedly targeting India, and making statements about profiteering, about Modi's war. All of that has had an impact on Indian psyche. And I think the damage, therefore, can potentially be long-term if it is not resolved quickly. So what we are witnessing is certainly, it seems, a recalibration from Washington. But again, Mr. Trump speaking today and what he might tweet tomorrow or what he might say on Truth Social tomorrow can be two very different things. So I think one statement doesn't, a policy make. So I don't think there is any policy framework that is changing. I think both sides will continue to negotiate the agreement. They were always doing it behind the closed doors. But his approach of megaphone diplomacy, his approach of using public levers to push India, that has not gone down very well. And unless that tactic changes, I think the strategic outcome may also be contingent on some of these negativities that have been in the relationship over the last few weeks and months. So I think I think Ambassador Rajamani is right. We have to wait and watch. But I think it would take a lot of effort on both sides to bring it back to where it was, because the mood has really soured, particularly in India.
You're absolutely right. Let me now go across. Welcome back to Trump Watch. Our coverage on the improvement or first signs of an improvement in Indo-US ties continues. Still with us, Venu Rajamani, former ambassador of India to the Netherlands, Professor Harsh Pant of ORF, and DP Srivastava, former Indian ambassador to Iran. Harsh, if I can come to you at this point, what do you think will now clinch the deal? Will India just be satisfied with putting aside those 25% additional penalty tariffs, or would we be looking at bringing the entire tariff down to about 10 to 15%? Harsh, that question to you.
Okay. Sorry, Parikshit, I lost you there. I think some initial overtures would be needed in the initial phase. And I think the Russia issue, if it can be marginalized in this conversation, it would really help, because that has been an additional strain that has come to this relationship out of nowhere. And this particularly at a time when Trump administration itself had been doing the outreach to Russia. So it's quite paradoxical in that sense that the Russia issue and India buying oil from Russia should become the center pivot around which American foreign policy towards India should revolve. And that question, therefore, has also raised those, the questions that ultimately it was the US that had asked India to stabilize the global energy markets by buying Russian oil. And then the issue that India had always maintained that as far as buying oil from Russia is concerned, that is something that almost was non-negotiable, because India, that was for the reasons of the political economy of Indian energy security. So I think that fundamental element has to be looked at, because it's that's a political statement. That's a political move. It's not an economic dynamic that India and the US should look at this question. So therefore, will have to be brought back to the table, in some ways made marginal to the conversation, to generate what we were earlier discussing, the trust deficit that is developing between the two countries. Because if that is not resolved, then there'll always be this question that you will always have issues, sanctions, secondary sanctions that you can use as weapons against India. And that is something I think Americans may not want to forget, had led to this crisis of understanding between India and the US because of the history of the Cold War. So there is a larger problem here, which this kind of approach on Russia has done, which has generated a sentiment in India that, look, America will always look at India through a lens which is going to be problematic, which is going to be hegemonistic, which is not going to be a partnership-led framework, and that, I think, has become the real issue. So before anything happens, it might be useful for the US to think of that issue and resolve it in a manner that generates that confidence, which would allow India to then move forward on other difficult issues. And therefore, I believe that the question of 25% additional tariffs because of the Russia question need to be looked at seriously by the Americans.
All right. Let me also get an ambassador.